Imagine a global crime ring hacking the system to erase the history of democracy. Sounds like a movie, but it's the premise of Investigation Declaration, a brilliant new educational game from iCivics. With America's 250th anniversary, this game turns your students into Secret Agent 6. They'll time travel across the world to track how Enlightenment ideas like natural rights and the social contract shaped our Declaration of Independence. It encourages kids to think freely and piece together evidence like real historians. It's completely free on iOS, Android, and the web. Teachers, parents, head to iCivics.org or search Investigation Declaration in your app store today. Imagine standing on a small 10-acre parcel of land at an old army post named Fort Severn in Annapolis, Maryland. The air is salty, carrying the chill of the Severn River. The year is 1845, and the Secretary of the Navy, George Bancroft, has just established a new naval school without a single dime of congressional funding. There are no massive granite halls or sprawling athletic fields yet, just 50 young midshipmen and 7 professors trying to carve out a curriculum of navigation, gunnery, and steam. Bancroft chose this spot because he wanted a healthy and secluded location to rescue these young men from the temptations and distractions of big city life. It was a modest experimental beginning, but from those original 10 acres, a crucible of leadership was born. One that would grow to 338 acres, weather the transition from sail to nuclear power, and forge the officers who would shape the course of global history. Welcome to Talk with History. One filmmaker, one historian, leading history-inspired world travels for the curious, the history lovers, and the explorer in us all. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
Today, we are opening the gates to one of the most sacred landscapes in American military history, the United States Naval Academy. Jenn recently spent time walking the yard, stepping directly into the spaces where decades of tradition, sacrifice, and heroism are preserved in stone. We're taking you inside the breathtaking Memorial Hall where the names of fallen alumni line the walls beneath an iconic "Don't Give Up the Ship" flag. Then we'll step into the soaring architecture of the Naval Academy Chapel before concluding our journey with a quiet, reflective walk through the cemetery at Hospital Point, where generations of naval giants rest along the water. Whether you're an active duty sailor, a veteran, or a lover of American history, this episode is a deep dive into how a tiny 19th century schoolhouse transformed into the ultimate anchor of American sea power. I'm Scott Benny, and today we are charting a course through the history of the United States Naval Academy. All right, Jenn, you visited my alma mater, and so I'm trying to rep here. There was a lot of questions on our last podcast, which was the Young Washington podcast, because I was wearing an Annapolis shirt, and some people were asking if I had gone there, and I have. Right, I'm a 2004 Naval Academy grad. Mm-hmm. Funny story behind that we'll have to tell another day, but on how I got to the Naval Academy. So we'll get there. So tell us a little bit about why you were at the Naval Academy, what we're going to talk about, and then what I'll do is I'll kind of take us through a little bit of the timeline of how the Naval Academy started way back in 1845.
Sure. So I was there with American Cruise Line, and we were doing America 250 along the Chesapeake, and Annapolis is just a stop. It's a part of the story, right? It's part of America's story. It is the location of the U.S. Naval Academy. Now, it's not the oldest service academy. That would be West Point. Yep. And of course, the rivalry is strong, and that's on the Hudson River. So really, like these two important rivers of American history have West Point, and the Chesapeake has the Naval Academy. So right now, the Naval Academy is kind of locked down, which I would assume it was then. It probably is right now because America is in a little bit of a turmoil. And so you had to have access to the academy. It wasn't open to the public. And because I'm married to a active duty officer, I have a dependent pass. And so I was able to get onto the Academy grounds, and I wanted to make footage of John Paul Jones and the chapel. And then as I was doing that, I said, I should just do a quick overview of the Academy, because there's so many neat things to kind of see there and historic things to see there. And so that's what I did, just a real quick hit, because I know some people were like, well, why didn't you go here? Why didn't you tell us more about this and this? And the truth is, I don't know a lot of those things. Scott knows them because he went to school there. I know the biggies that we've hit when I visit with you. And that's what I kind of gave a taste of in this video. So it's just the couple big monuments that are important on the main yard area where the grass is, the chapel, Bancroft Hall, and the cemetery. And that's kind of where I take you and kind of give you the history of.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, while I was there, I didn't know anything. I was not the best midshipman. In fact, I was far, 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 far from the best midshipman. And so just a quick story about how I ended up at the Naval Academy. This is kind of for our listeners. And if you are searching up history about, information about the Naval Academy, and this is like, someone who went there, maybe I'll listen to their story and how they got in. Do not follow the path that I followed on how to get into the Naval Academy. So as a 2000 high school graduate, looking at colleges, and I was a gymnast, right? So I got Navy gymnastics here, looking for gymnastics colleges all over the nation. And so I was looking at opportunities, sent a bunch of stuff out, just like athletes do nowadays, to different colleges. I was not the most talented. I was not sought after, really recruited for gymnastics, but sent something off to the Naval Academy because my mom was like, well, what about this one? We're looking in a magazine. I was like, sure, whatever. I had no idea what it was. And lucky for me, the old school Japanese gymnastics coach at the Naval Academy knew one of my old school Japanese gymnastics coach from Central California. It's a very small world. And so they said, hey, you've got good grades. You were coached by Sam Sakamoto. Why don't you come and kind of do a tour here? So I started filling out the application. I did a tour there. I got out there in like May of my senior year, which most students are applying May of their junior year, and they know they want to go. They're applying for ROTC and all this stuff. Ended up getting in. I got a rejection letter and an acceptance letter. I got both.
Because typically you need a congressional recommend to go to any service academy.
Yeah, you have a certain congressmen and women, they get a certain number of allocations for their district. So you have to, typically it's an interview, and then your congressman will basically give you that nomination to go to the Naval Academy. Now, there are sports athletes. There are kind of athlete routes to go through that you don't. And so the one time you won't need a congressional nomination. And so I was able to go through that route for varsity athletics. Same thing for like baseball and football, stuff like that. So ended up getting in. Very surprised. Didn't know what I was getting into, because when I visited, all the typical military stuff was done at the end of the year. It was after the plebes had done all their stuff and everything like that. So
people
I was like,
playing frisbee.
People are playing frisbee, and they're outside with their shirts off. It's May. It's in Annapolis. It's beautiful. I was like, this is really nice. Like, I can totally do this. Like, you tell me they send me here for free. Like I can do this, and I get to do gymnastics. So I show up a couple weeks later, just kind of, not normal for everybody in my class at high school. You're like, you're going where? You're going into the Naval Academy? Like, what's happening?
So he goes to plebe summer.
So I go to plebe summer. It's our version of boot camp.
And it's this abbreviation, ancient Roman word. It's like
Plebeian.
A plebeian. You're not quite in the military yet. It's kind of like they're testing you. You're going through this test.
It's an abbreviation of the word plebeian, meaning you're kind of lower than lower class, right? Which they are. And they treat you as such. And so you show up, and it's like boot camp. So they start yelling at you and all this stuff, which I had no clue of. I had no idea. So I show up my first day they call it induction day, I day. And I show up and they say, plebe. They start kind of drill instructor stuff right away. Think Gunnery Sergeant Ermy. Plebe, from now on, the first and last words out of your mouth will be sir or ma'am. Do you understand? Now, the expectation is for you to say, sir, yes, sir. That's what you're doing for the next 8 weeks of your summer. And I stood there and I said, yep. And so then the detailer, this upperclassman, kind of looks at me and says, plebe, from now on, the first and last words out of your mouth will be sir or ma'am. Do you understand? And I was kind of confused, and I said, yes, I understand you. And then, and I of course, I truly didn't understand. And then he thought I was messing with him. And then the person sitting next to him was this female instructor, upperclassman. She kind of stops what she's doing. She puts her stuff down and she just kind of turns to watch what's about to happen to me. And he's like steam coming out of his ears. His face starts turning red and he just like rips into me and says, "Plebe," and he's screaming at the top of his lungs. And this is like not the norm at the very first desk, but he thought I was like taking an attitude from moment one. "Plebe, from now on, the first and last words out of your mouth will be sir or ma'am. Do you understand?" And then I understood. And then it was like just complete and utter blur after that. My head shaved, I'm getting shots in the arm, and like I'm just in utter shell shock for the first probably week of plebe summer. And I remember calling home. They let you call home because we didn't have cell phones at the time. They let you call home on these payphones, and they like assign a time to you, and they say like your parents need to be by the phone at home so that they don't miss you because you won't get another chance to call home for another 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so you call home. I called home. It was like 5 days in. I was crying. It's like snot running down I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was just in complete and utter mental chaos. And like I remember my parents just like totally calming me down. And then after that, I was totally fine. Yeah. Because physically,
yes,
I was in phenomenal shape, right? And a lot of people who go there that are athletes do very well, right? Physically, I was super strong. That like nothing they could do would get me. I was a gymnast.
Yeah, the 50 push-ups.
But all of the military stuff, I had literally zero clue whatsoever.
So that's what's so funny about this, because people plan to go here. Their dream is to go to the Naval Academy. So they know exactly what to expect from plebe summer. They know exactly what the whole thing is about. They're ready for the boot camp. They're ready for the induct day.
Yeah, not me.
And so for Scott to act the way he did that very first day, they were kind of really taken aback by it.
Yeah.
Because nobody really is messing around here. No one's like forced to go to the academy. People want to go here. And
yeah, so there's times of low kind of recruiting numbers. And this was before 9/11, mm-hmm. right? So this recruiting numbers were a little bit lower. I talked to people many years later and saying like, hey, there was another person who was a couple years behind me. Like, hey, the years that we got in, like it was actually easier. Now it's like, it's insane how difficult it is. Now, of course, I had good grades, mm-hmm. and academically I was like middle of the pack while I was there, but way ahead in high school because the bar is so high there. But it's just funny that here I am in this incredibly historic, prestigious, top tier, known worldwide, academic and military institution. And I have absolutely zero clue of what I'm doing. And so, you rewind that clock back to 1845 when George Bancroft kind of just snagged the midshipmen.
They had no clue what they were doing.
They had no clue. And so that's what he was doing. When I said in the intro that he wanted a healthy and safe place, really what he was, because this was the founding of the Naval Academy was spurred by basically Congress realizing that there was a lack of structured training for naval officers in the Navy at the time. And I think there was some like Sumner, mm-hmm. Kind of like rebellion. It was like,
yes.
Something happened where
the Sumner's affair.
Yeah.
A mutiny.
There was a mutiny on a ship. And so they're like, okay, that's it. We got to figure something out. So George Bancroft, who was Secretary of the Navy in 1845, nominated by President Polk, mm-hmm. he said, okay, make something happen. And he did. He snagged 50 midshipmen. He snagged 7 professors, and they went to Annapolis. They took over Fort Severn, and they said, classes in session. And that was October of 1845. So that's when it was official, was October of 1845.
So it was this, people were at sea, and there was a mutiny that happened at sea, and it resulted in an execution of a Secretary of War's son. And so there was not a lot of this understanding of military structure and military protocol. And so you get Commodore Matthew Perry, and we've talked about Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry. This is his brother. And it's a very naval historic family, Newport, Rhode Island. We've taken you to his grave. Both of the Perrys are buried there in Newport. And he takes considerable interest in this naval education, and they just want this apprentice system and helps establish this curriculum. This is just understanding what your role is as a naval officer and leadership at sea and what that looks like. And it's to prevent problems like they have been having.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because the original, when the institution started in October of 1845, the thought was a year of schooling, 2 or 3 years at sea, come back for another year of schooling, and then you were considered graduated from the Naval Academy. So that's actually what it was, is a lot more sea time. They were out there actually doing what midshipmen would traditionally do and be on ships.
Yeah. And so much so that for a long time, if you were going to the academy, you were midshipmen on ships until 1912. That's when graduates became officers. Yeah. So it was a little bit different, seen as the training you were getting there. It wasn't making officers of the Navy really just good sailors until 1912.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of key, what I've done. We're going to talk about the brief overview of the history of the Naval Academy. And as we touch on certain things, Jen's going to dive into what she got to see while she was there. And because if we did the full deep dive history of the Naval Academy, this would be 5 episodes, easy, an hour and a half long, because there's so much history around the Naval Academy. So I pulled out a couple key dates that folks I think would find interesting. So in 1860, in June of 1860, the Herndon Monument, which is actually erected for the first time. And now the Herndon ceremony didn't start till much later. It's like 1955, but the Herndon Monument was erected, and that monument commemorated Commander William Lewis Herndon, who went down with the mail steamer Central America in a storm off South Carolina in 1857, better known as Hatteras.
Yeah.
Right. And we've done videos down there.
And that's the graveyard of the Atlantic. And so it's because of the sandbars that move so often that ships run aground and sink. And so he actually, his ship foundered there.
Now, and we'll jump forward a little bit. I'm going to kind of jump through some of these key moments in Naval Academy history.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Herndon real fast.
Okay, let's talk about Herndon first.
So all the women and children were saved. And that's why he gets this monument, although he goes down with his ship. So he goes down with his ship, but they're all saved. And so they've built this obelisk to him. It's a granite obelisk, and it has Herndon on it. And it's right in front of the chapel.
Yeah.
So it has a prominent point when you're walking that grassy yard in the Naval Academy. Now, Scott's going to talk about the ceremony that happens with Herndon. What people really, when they think Herndon, they don't think this monument or this captain that went down with his ship.
They think about the ceremony.
They think about this ceremony.
We'll talk about there once we get to the 1950s.
Yeah.
So we'll jump forward a little bit. Now in 1890, the Navy N, which is kind of like the Letterman, like in a high school, you get a Letterman's jacket. Mm-hmm. So the Navy N varsity athletic letter is introduced. That was also the very first year that we played the United States Military Academy, so West Point. And we beat them 24-0. So the first time we ever met West Point in the Army-Navy football game was 1890, and Navy won 24-0. So sorry, West Point guys. Jumping forward again to 1906. Now this will give you something here to talk about because we already made a video on this. The body of John Paul Jones moved to Dahlgren Hall for a grand commemoration ceremony, and President Theodore Roosevelt delivered the principal address. So we made a video about this before, about John Paul Jones's crypt, and that was one of the things you visited while you were there. Yeah,
and so they're going to lay the cornerstone for the chapel in 1904, but it's not complete, and that's why he's moved to the hall there. And they dedicate the chapel in 1908. So his body will eventually be moved to the crypt. They have to build the crypt underneath for that. But the chapel is dedicated to sea power and God looking over the men at sea. So it's very nautical when you go in there. Plus, it's large enough to accommodate 2,500 people. Now, I talk about the classes at the academy. It's about 1,000 per class, a little bit more. So about 4,500 midshipmen are there. So you can get about half of them in the chapel at one time. They lose about 100 mids per class. And so they'll graduate about 1,000.
Lose academically or other reasons, not for training purposes or death.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, lose like people
or they
will,
quit, right?
Yes.
Sometimes they'll quit, right?
People will people will, I say wash out, but I don't know.
They'll wash out. They'll get in trouble. So a lot of times, I had friends and roommates of mine, right, that just, they could hack it academically, but just the military life just wasn't for them, right? I had a good friend of mine who just kind of had a breakdown at one point in his sophomore year, and he ended up leaving, and that was it, right? He didn't owe any time back.
I mean, it's a lot of discipline, it's a lot of you have to be very measured, and you like routine. And if you're not used to having to adhere to that, I mean, uniform standards, hair standards, grooming standards, if you don't want to give up those freedoms of yourself to the bigger Navy, then this is your chance to kind of understand that and see yourself out. That has this big copper cupola and the dome, yes, and it's beautiful, and you can see it. It's actually higher than the State House in Annapolis, so it's very beautiful. We take you in there, show you some of the videos of it. Beautiful stained glass.
Yeah, I'll link that John Paul Jones crypt in the Naval Academy Chapel video in the show notes of this.
Yes, and so that's why John Paul Jones doesn't, when he's brought to the academy, he's not initially brought right into his crypt area, because they're still building the chapel at the time that he comes home.
Yeah. Now, as we're jumping ahead, so in 1912, so Congress approved the commissioning of graduates, as Jen mentioned earlier, on graduation day, vice previously requiring 2 years at sea as service to can kind of be considered passed, right? So then in 1912, that's when they said, hey, throw your hat in the air, and you're now commissioned as an officer in the United States Navy. And so that's all in 1913. That's when John Paul Jones was laid to rest in the crypt of the chapel.
Yes.
Now in 1925, second class ring dance becomes a tradition. So that's a big thing for second class midshipmen. When I say second class, it's like a junior. So as you go through your years at the Naval Academy, I think it's pretty similar at West Point. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know they're plebes their first year as well. So when you are a freshman, that's the same thing as a plebe. And the academy, you're a youngster.
Fourth class.
Fourth class midshipman. Fourth, third, second, first, right? It kind of goes with your year, but the other name is plebe, then youngster, right? You'd be a sophomore. Then just second class.
Third class, yeah.
Right?
Second class.
And then firstie would be, and there's websites, there's like Forever for Firstie and all that stuff. That's when you're a senior. So that's when you're kind of starting to run the show. So second class ring dance becomes a tradition, and that's a big deal because you get your class ring, your classes come up with their class crest. And so sometimes guys will, you have people from all over the United States that attend the Naval Academy from every single state, right? And so I had roommates that were from Alabama and Tennessee and Maryland and Montana, and I knew people from everywhere. And sometimes there's guys there, girls there that have been dating the same person since high school. So a lot of times they'll fly someone in for second class ring dance. So it's a big thing. And also in 1925, Navy gymnastics was named the national champion for the sixth consecutive year.
Wow, babe.
Yeah. So Navy gymnastics and now Navy gymnastics, I could not make the team nowadays if I was trying to, because the team is very, very good, what it is right now. But I was lucky enough to do a little bit there. And then jumping ahead again to 1955, that's when the tradition of Herndon really started. So if you're not familiar with the Naval Academy, or if you're just curious, or if you went there, I would love to hear fellow graduate stories. But in 1955, so that's when the tradition of greasing Herndon, the monument, for plebes to climb the monument in exchange for basically not being a plebe anymore. So the whole goal, and you can find it, they stream it online now, but they grease it up with chicken fat, grease, and all whatever they can find. And they put the midshipman like little Dixie cap on it. Like think of what like a traditional sailor wears, right? But for the plebes, they wear one with like a blue rim on it. So they tape it on the top. They grease the whole thing up, and it's probably 25 feet high.
Yeah, and again, it's an obelisk. It's 21 feet.
It's like a mini Washington monument.
It's a mini obelisk. So they're taking this flat obelisk and they're greasing it up.
Yeah.
And it's 21 feet high.
And so you have to climb it. And so they say go, and you get all 1,000 plebes running up to this thing. And they're just in PT gear. Guys are taking their shirts off.
Physical training.
Women are in their bathing suits, their one-piece bathing suits. And their goal is to climb this thing, get the plebe cap off, and put on the official midshipman cover cap, like what you would see. Think of what an officer wears in the Navy. And once that's done, then you're done being a plebe. You are a plebe no more. So they are motivated.
Yeah.
They are motivated. And they're getting sprayed down with water the whole time because you think about 1,000 people trying to climb this thing, and it's tall enough that you have to stack, you have to stand on each other's shoulders. So what'll happen is there's usually like the big football players or something like that. They'll go back to back. They'll lock arms around the base of it, and then people will climb on top of them, do the same thing facing outwards. And then they'll have someone climb up over them. So it's everybody, it's a team effort.
It's almost 4 body lengths.
Almost 4 body lengths, unless you can get someone real tall. And so it takes some time. And I remember I was on that second row at one point, and you're always falling down because you get so tired and you're all greased up. So it's all slippery and everything, and it's hot. That's why they're spraying the hose. And I think it took us 3 hours. The record, I think, is under an hour because one year, whoever greased it had the good idea to use chicken wire to make the chicken grease, to make the grease stick. But then the plebes figured out they can just use the chicken wire to climb up. So they used that, and it wasn't as hard as it could have been. So they didn't do that again. But it typically takes a couple hours.
Yep.
And for us, the legend for each class, the supposed legend for whoever gets the cover off and puts the new cover on, they are supposed to be the first admiral of your class. Now, I know the person that was the first in our class, and he's getting ready to retire as a commander. But he had a successful career as a fellow HR officer, actually. But yeah, so that's the tradition.
Do you have an admiral in your class yet?
We do not.
Oh, so see, you could still make it.
So, but that's the tradition. And so people will stand around and watch. Nowadays, they stream it online.
It's super cool.
And it's super fun just to get out there and do it. And it's team effort. And sometimes, it just depends on who gets up there. Usually you get a tall, skinny person to stand on top to reach, to get it off, and to put the new one back on.
And then you're a plebe no more.
Then you don't have to do all the silly plebe stuff.
Yeah, so you're not being hazed in that regard anymore.
Let's be clear, it was never really hazing. It's training, right? But all the things that plebes have to do, you're not allowed to listen, at least at the time when I was there. You're not allowed to listen to music. You have to have your door open at all times. You're not allowed to, you always have to be studying. You have to run with
civvies.
You have to run with high knees everywhere in Bancroft Hall, and you have to square your corners. You have to greet every single upperclassman. It's super annoying. So trust me when I say they were incredibly motivated to climb Herndon and not have to do all of that anymore. So that started in 1955.
I will say that they found the bell to Herndon's ship was discovered in her wreck in 1988. It was donated to the Naval Academy, and now the bell is positioned next to the monument. And so if you go see Herndon and you see the ship's bell is also right beside it. So it's kind of neat to see.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now jumping ahead from 1955 to 1976, so you'll appreciate this. This is the first class that inducted women into it. So 1976 was the last graduating class with no women there, but that's when they started, that's when they allowed women to come into the Naval Academy. So the class of 1980 was the first graduating class that had women that were a part of it. So that was a big thing. And I saw this, because I saw a picture of Mr. Tom Selleck at the Naval Academy in 1986. He visited the Naval Academy to film his last episode of Magnum.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, it's been in other movies too. I mean, Naval Academy has been in Patriot Games.
Yeah.
Right? That's Jack Ryan is a professor of history at the Naval Academy. And you can go to that gate from the movie. Believe me, I've done it if you want to see it on Instagram. But another statue that's very important there that every time we walk by it, Scott has to stop. And but there's actually 2 statues. But this one is right there by Bancroft Hall. And it's supposed to be, the students say Tecumseh, but it's actually not Tecumseh. It's it's Tanneman. And it's the replica of the figurehead from the USS Delaware. And it was an original wood carving of Tanneman. He was a 17th century chief of the Delaware. They replaced it with bronze in the 1930s. And for a very long time, they painted the statue.
Yes. So actually my class, you're broken up into my company. You're broken up when I was there was 30 companies. Now it's large enough that there's 36 companies because the class sizes have grown just a little bit since I graduated over 20 years ago. But yes, so we used to paint Tecumseh, and we would call that T Court, right? We call that T Court out in front of Bancroft Hall and Memorial Hall, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But we used to paint Tecumseh, which I still know him as, and paint him typically before football games. So during the football season, is we'd paint it kind of something and with some motivational statement, right? It was never crass, right? It was always very lighthearted.
Red, white, and blue.
Red, white, and blue. And at the time, like when I was in college, like a lot of the superhero movies were coming out. So we paint them look like Captain America or the Hulk or,
Iron Man.
different colors, Iron Man, stuff like that. And it was fun. And I don't know why they don't do it anymore, but they don't. And that's
Probably not great for the bronze.
Probably.
So I think now they cover it with wood and you paint the wood.
Oh, okay.
So they still kind of do something in commemoration of it. But there's another statue right by the front entrance of the Naval Academy to their mascot. And I said Billy the goat, and I was corrected. It's Bill the goat.
Yes, it's Bill the goat. And you'll see that's our Naval Academy kind of mascot logo. You'll see it on t-shirts, the other t-shirt that I was wearing for our last podcast. You'll see Bill the goat kind of charging ahead, right, with the horns and everything like that.
And there is, certain luck to certain things that we rub on Bill the goat. And this is the mascot of the Naval Academy. And they've always had a live goat to represent them as well that they bring to the games. And so there's been many renditions of Bill the goat and different numbers. They've retired Bill the goat. And there's a funny story of the West Point and the Naval Academy kind of stealing each other's mascots.
Yeah.
And there's a funny story of West Point stealing an old retired Bill the goat, thinking it was the young Bill the goat. And they got the old Bill the goat, and it was just arthritic and this old smelly goat. And they were like, oh my gosh, they had to try to get this old goat back to its pasture.
And so there's always rivalries there. Like while I was there, the Naval Academy rugby team, they were the ones who managed and helped Bill the goat at the games, right? So the rugby team, they'd be wearing the blue and gold striped shirts. So I had some friends that were on the rugby team, and they were always managing Bill the goat, right? And then Army Navy week, you always got to kind of keep a watch out, because you got to watch if they're coming down and all that stuff. So it's a fun rivalry, Army and Navy, as everybody knows, Army Navy football game and stuff like that. And I didn't go into pick out too many more dates and all that stuff, but I was looking through it. And if you go to the Naval Academy website, they have a great timeline of all these kind of key dates. And that's where I was pulling this information from. But I mean, it's absolutely incredible, the people that come from both West Point and the Naval Academy. Because I think like the first American to win the Nobel Prize in like physics or something was a Naval Academy graduate. We've got, multiple gold medalists. We had the Naval Academy rowing team win the Olympics one year. Like it's all this, it's absolutely incredible. And I definitely didn't appreciate it while I was there as a midshipman just trying to survive. But looking back, the history coming out of there and the prestige, even to this day, I still feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's my alma mater.
Yeah, I always love going there with you. So for me, most people know I did not go to the Naval Academy. I went to Penn State on a Navy scholarship. So we did do the whole 4th class, 3rd class, 2nd class, 1st class. We don't really do the plebe, and we don't call each other firsties and stuff because it's not really so much a part of our life. It's just one of the things we do while we're at school there. And so when I met Scott, I didn't really know anything about the academy. So going there for the first time and seeing everything for the first time, I really wanted to know more. And I was so enthralled. And Scott was more like, I survived it and I don't really want to talk about it. Yeah. But he's grown to really love it now.
It took me, it was one of those things. I was one of those folks. It took me 20 years to come back around. And it was at my 20-year reunion when I got to see a bunch of my old classmates and friends that I hadn't seen in forever. Some were still serving and some were out. That's when I kind of came back around. Finally, I was like, okay, I can come back here and not like have a twitch in my eye as I'm coming across certain bridges that we had derogatory names for and stuff like that. So plenty of memories there. I remember my last night sleeping in the Naval Academy like it was yesterday with my two, with Zach and Shane. my two roommates that I've been roommates with 3 out of my 4 years there with both of them. And just lifelong friends, brothers in arms, brothers and sisters in arms. And, we'll talk about Memorial Hall. I've had a couple classmates that have been killed in combat, nobody that I knew super, super well. I did have, 1 or 2 close friends of mine that died kind of in between trainings. But that's what Bancroft Hall, which is the largest continuous dormitory in the world, inside of Bancroft Hall is Memorial Hall, which is where we kind of honor the memory of all of those who died in combat and went before us.
Yeah, so Bancroft Hall is that big hall that's really in front of the Tecumseh statue. It's in front of the crest, and it's named for George Bancroft, who was Secretary of the Navy when Naval Academy was started.
Founded it.
And it holds the entire brigade of midshipmen. Everybody lives inside this one huge dormitory. And inside Bancroft Hall, when you go right up the front steps, this is what this week's video is Memorial Hall. And Memorial Hall is dedicated to all those midshipmen, men and women, who gave their lives in the pursuit of freedom in a conflict preserving America. So it lists them all. And so you can go in there and see their names engraved, and they have different memorabilia to them. They have a recreation of the Don't Give Up the Ship flag, kind of what you see here behind us. The actual one, they have an entire museum there at the Naval Academy. The museum has the original flag from Oliver Hazard Perry and the Battle of Lake Erie. They also have a lot of other mementos. Think of the Battle of the Ironclads. Think about Pearl Harbor. Think about a lot of naval battles of American history. They have a lot of artifacts dedicated to that at the museum. So it's definitely worth a visit. But Memorial Hall, you might know Travis Manion of the Travis Manion Foundation. He is of Scott's class, 2004. And so his name is on the wall. There were some people I also visited at the cemetery there. So there's an entire cemetery at the Naval Academy, and we had never gone there before because it's further down.
Yeah, it's out at Hospital Point, so it's not really where the academic buildings are, but it's kind of further out on the academy grounds.
Yeah, you go across a bridge, and it's kind of, they called it Strawberry Hill. And it was the effort of the academy to kind of expand after the Civil War. So they bought that whole area in 1868. And I walked out there for the first time. I wanted to find Senator John McCain's grave and came across Eric Christensen. And Eric Christensen's name is in Memorial Hall. He is Naval Academy class of 1995. He was the Navy SEAL commander in charge of Operation Red Wings when we talk about Michael Murphy, and the only Penn Stater to receive the Medal of Honor, Navy SEAL. Eric Christensen was also a Navy SEAL. He was the commander. They went out to rescue them, a group of SEALs, and taken down by an RPG. So he is buried there. And so his name is also on the wall and at the cemetery. Like, there's very famous naval heroes who are buried in the Naval Academy cemetery. So I had access to that, found McCain. And so there's an entire video to that as well.
Yeah, there's many famous, well-known, like there was one astronaut grave, right, that you would kind of went and talked about because it just looks cool, right? So it caught your eye and you talked a little bit about it. And someone in the comments had said like, hey, you really should dig deeper into that because this guy was part of the Apollo 8 mission. He's one of the first people to like do this, that, and the other. It's pretty incredible, some of the people that come out of this. And you say this all the time. A lot of times these astronauts tend to become from the Navy because some of the best pilots in the world come from naval aviation.
Yeah, because they love naval aviators. And so I kind of honored a couple naval aviators while I was there. I actually found naval aviator number 1 because we're all numbered while I was there. They like naval aviators for shuttle commanders in the space program because we're so dialed in. You have to land on a moving target. You're landing on a ship in the ocean. And they really like that because when you know anything about flying a space shuttle, you have an envelope and you have to hit the envelope at a certain angle to fly back into the atmosphere. And so they really like Navy pilots because we're flying that line, we're flying that ball. I would say they really want that kind of accuracy. And I just loved being over there. So it's away from the main area. If you've ever made it out to the cemetery, that was my first time of all the times we've ever visited the academy. That was my first time ever visiting it. It's very peaceful over there. It's beautiful. I was happy to go over there and honor them. So it was in making that video that I made this little kind of like snack of the Naval Academy locations. And like I said, there's not a ton on there because I didn't go there. I wasn't with Scott, but we will go back and do some more in-depth stuff, but just a little taste of what you can see historically while you're there. I probably would not have learned or appreciated much about the Academy if I was not married to someone who went there. So thank you for teaching me so much about it.
Yeah, well, I didn't teach you that much because I didn't know much myself. I just knew what I experienced. As you leave the manicured grounds of the yard and walk past the gates back into the historic streets of Annapolis, you carry the echo of thousands of footsteps with you. Standing in Memorial Hall under the Don't Give Up the Ship flag, looking at the names of those who gave their lives, you realize that the Naval Academy isn't just a place of education, it's a living monument to duty. From the solemn majesty of the chapel crypt where John Paul Jones rests to the quiet, water-swept headstones at Hospital Point, this campus is a physical map of the American naval soul. The midshipmen marching to class today are walking the same paths as the giants who came before them, preparing to write the next chapter in our nation's defense. If you ever get the chance to visit Annapolis, do more than just snap a photo of the sailboat-lined harbor. Step into the yard. Feel the weight of Memorial Hall and take a quiet moment at Hospital Point to honor the ones who anchored our freedom. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our community at thehistoryroadtrip.com. Make sure you hit that follow button in that podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time. How many times have you driven past a piece of history without even knowing it? Stop missing out. The History Drive app puts over 500 historic locations right on your screen, revealing the incredible stories hidden just off the highway. Follow our trail with expert-led videos, podcasts, and one-click GPS directions, all for a launch price of just $2.50. Don't just drive, discover. Visit historyordrive.com today.